the queen came home to trouble and found a human servant guarding her children. Prologue: The empty sky. The war cruiser Silent Mandible dropped out of slip space 3 hours ahead of schedule, and Queen Ythara Vel'Korran of the Ninth Hive felt it in her carapace before the pilot even announced it. Something was wrong. She had spent 41 days on Thren Station negotiating a ceasefire with the coalition ambassadors. 41 days of careful words, careful silences, careful smiles with too many teeth. She had done it for one reason only: so that her hive, her nest, her 4 younglings would never have to know what war smelled like. And now, as the cruiser broke atmosphere over her home world, she saw smoke rising from the eastern spire of her own palace. "Status," she snapped, mandibles clicking with a sound her staff called the storm click, the one that meant someone was about to lose rank, or a limb, or both. "Hive Mother, comms to the nest have been down for 6 hours, her adjutant said, voice tight. "Security drones report conflicting signals, 6 hours. Her younglings were 4, 5, 6, and 8 years old. 6 hours was a lifetime for a hive that small." "Land," Ythara said. "Now." Chapter 1. What the Fire Left Behind. The palace courtyard was a ruin of scorched marble and shattered war glass when the queen's shuttle touched down. Bodies of her personal guard, 3 of them, good soldiers, hive loyal for a decade, lay where they'd fallen defending the inner gate. Ythara didn't scream. Queens of the Vel'Korran line were not permitted to scream. Not even here, not even now. She simply walked, faster and faster, through corridors she had known since she hatched, past broken statues and burnt tapestries, toward the nursery wing at the heart of the palace. She heard voices before she reached the door. One of them was young, her youngest, Szeth, only 4 cycles old, hiccuping through tears. The other voice was low, steady, and human. "Almost there, buddy. You're doing great. Just hold my hand a little tighter." Ythara stopped in the doorway, and what she saw stole the air from all 4 of her breathing spiracles. The nursery had been gutted by fire on one side. The saboteur's work, she would later learn. A bioincendiary meant to collapse the ceiling onto the brood chamber. But the chamber hadn't collapsed. A human man, soot-streaked and bleeding from a gash above one eyebrow, had wedged a fallen support beam against the wall, with nothing but a maintenance jack and sheer stubbornness, holding back a ton of stone with what looked like scavenged palace furniture. Behind him, huddled in a nest of torn curtains and overturned cushions, were all 4 of her children. Alive. Filthy, terrified, but alive. "Mother!" Szeth shrieked, and all 4 younglings surged toward her at once. Ythara caught them, folded 4 sets of small clawed limbs against her thorax, and for one moment forgot she was a queen at all. Then she looked up at the human, still bracing the beam, blood dripping steadily off his chin, and asked the only question that mattered. "Who are you?" Chapter 2. 41 days ago. His name was Daniel Osei. 3 months earlier, he'd taken a contract nobody else wanted, nursery aide to a hive queen's brood, off-world, 6-month term, hazard pay that made his student loan officer weep with joy. The other applicants had lasted a week. Vertal younglings were not human children. They molted. They bit hard and often before they learned language properly. They communicated half in words and half in pheromone scent that no human nose could parse, which meant Daniel had spent his first month getting everything wrong and apologizing in 3 different ways at once. But he stayed. And slowly, the biting stopped, and the scent signals started making a rough kind of sense to him, not chemically, but behaviorally. The way you learn a dog's muzus without speaking dog. He learned that Szeth hummed before a tantrum, that the eldest, Aurea, went quiet and still right before she cried, not after. That 8-year-old Vess pretended not to need a nightlight, but always slept closer to Daniel's cot than the others. When the queen left for Thren Station, she'd summoned Daniel to her private chamber the night before departure. An honor no human contractor had received in the palace's recorded history. My steward regent will govern the hive in my absence, she'd told him. But my children will be watched by you. Not because you are strong, not because you are fertile, because in 3 months you have learned to hear them when they cannot speak. That is worth more than a legion. Daniel hadn't fully understood the weight of that sentence until the night the palace burned. Chapter 3. 6 hours. It started with the lights failing in the West Wing. Nothing dramatic, just a flicker the security staff blamed on a power coupling. Then the internal comms went down. Then Daniel heard boots in the corridor outside the nursery. Too many boots, moving with the wrong rhythm. Not palace guard cadence at all. He didn't wait to find out who they were. He'd read the hive's emergency protocols twice out of sheer nervous habit during his first week, back when everything terrified him. Now that paranoia paid for itself, he barricaded the nursery's inner door, herded all 4 younglings into the reinforced supply alcove meant for storm shelter, and killed the chamber lights so no glow would show under the door. The saboteurs. Coalition-aligned extremists who wanted the ceasefire to fail, Ythara would learn later, never made it past the outer gate. The Palace Guard died buying that ground. But one incendiary charge, meant for the throne archive, had been planted wrong, and instead cooked off beneath the nursery's support wall. When the ceiling began to groan, Daniel didn't think about the fact that he was a temp contractor with a nursing certificate and absolutely no structural engineering training. He thought about Zeth's humming and Oria's silence and Vess sleeping closer to his cot every single night. He grabbed the nearest heavy object, a maintenance jack from a storage locker he'd once explored out of boredom, and wedged it under the failing beam with every ounce of strength his very unremarkable human body had. Then he held, for 6 hours, while smoke curled through the cracks and comms stayed dark and he had no idea if help was coming at all. Daniel Osei held a ceiling up with a stolen jack, a prayer, and the flat-out refusal to let 4 children he wasn't even the same species as die in the dark. Chapter 4. The Queen's Reckoning. Ythara ordered engineers into the nursery within minutes, and once the beam was properly secured, Daniel's knees finally buckled. Not from the weight, but from 6 hours of adrenaline leaving his body all at once. Ythara caught him before he hit the floor. A hive queen, sovereign of 100,000 subjects, personally caught a human contractor so he wouldn't crack his skull on her marble. Later, in the medical wing, with her younglings finally asleep in a heavily guarded chamber and Daniel's head wound stitched closed, Ythara sat beside his cot and said nothing for a long while. "You could have run," she finally said. The evacuation ports were 60 meters from the nursery. "You had time, I know," Daniel said. "You are not hive. You owe my line no blood debt, no oath, no loyalty older than 3 months of employment." "I know that too. Then why?" Daniel thought about it honestly, because she deserved honesty, not a speech. "Back home, we've got a saying," he said. "You don't have to share blood to be family. I spent 3 months learning what makes your kids scared and what makes them laugh and which one needs someone to leave the light on." "That's not a contract line item, Your Majesty. That's just knowing someone." Ythara was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something no Vertal queen had done for a human in recorded history. She bowed her head. "Then you are hive," she said, "not by blood, by choice. And the Vel'Korran line does not forget its own." Epilogue. 1 year later, the eastern spire was rebuilt within the season, better fortified than before. The coalition extremists responsible were found and dealt with through channels Ythara declined to discuss over dinner. Daniel Osei never went home. Not because he couldn't, but because somewhere between the biting toddlers and the burning ceiling, home had quietly relocated itself around him. He still sleeps with his door cracked open. Some nights, he wakes to find Vess curled up on the floor beside his cot anyway, technically 11 years old now, and much too dignified to admit he still needs the company, Daniel just pulls a blanket over him and lets it go. Queens keep records of everything: treaties, wars, bloodlines going back 1,000 generations. But in the private archive of House Vel'Korran, there is exactly one entry filed not under staff or contractor, but under kin. It reads simply, Daniel Osei, human, held the sealing up.